We are live. Welcome, everybody. This is Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain. I am very, very pleased to have Dr. Shiva Aradurai, and he is an MIT PhD and more acronyms than an alphabet soup in a windstorm. And he has, of course, 4 PhDs, if I remember rightly. He also invented email. He's actually
literally seeing the burning down of their industry. So pharma companies are now moving to a different area, vaccines and what are called cell therapies. These do not need to go through the same regulatory framework. In fact, they're treated as another class called biologics. So this is why if you look at the 30 vaccines for kids that were pushed forward by the CDC as guidelines, not one of them, Stefan, has gone through double-blind placebo-controlled studies. It's quite extraordinary. And one HPV vaccine that they claimed they did, and I want to come back to that, talk about it, was absolutely fraud, what they did. And we'll talk about that. So they don't have they don't have to go through the same regulatory framework. And if you look at the history of this process, starting in 1962, John Kennedy signed the National Vaccine Act. And that was based on a very, very rudimentary understanding of the immune system, which is what's still used today by guys like Fauci and Gates to put forward it. You know, it's very different than the understanding of the immune system that I've put forward. And in fact, I gave the prestige lecture at the National Science Foundation on this. They didn't invite Fauci or Gates to give that lecture. They invited me because of the knowledge I have around that. And we'll talk about that. But the fundamental issues, the very rudimentary understanding that they had of the immune system in 1962 was the basis post-polio vaccine, pre-measles vaccine that John Kennedy instituted the National Vaccine Act, which gave rise to the CDC and the powers for them to come up with the vaccine guidelines. So now follow after Kennedy signed that into law from 1962, 24 years later, 1986. Well, people were starting to report injuries from vaccines. They were suing the vaccine manufacturers. Now, instead of eliminating those vaccine mandates, because in those 24 years, we'd started to learn very different things about the immune system. What did we do? Well, his brother, Ted Kennedy, comes in. You know, Reagan. So what they did was this National Vaccine Injury Program literally in some ways destroyed the Constitution. They carved out part of the court system out of the U.S. judicial system, and they put it under Health and Human Services, a vaccine court, Stefan. And that vaccine court said they would adjudicate on behalf of the vaccine manufacturers the lawsuits. This means you shielded, you indemnified the vaccine manufacturers. And you set the is who has been behind when you come back to now the big pharma, the big academia, and the big hospital establishment, that triumvirate, you know, centered and founded by something very, very powerful, 3 foundations, 2 at least, and 1 more recently, the Gates Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative, both together with the WHO, CDC, UNICEF, all these other people we didn't ever elect, okay? Together, the Gates Foundation created what's called Gavi, you know, Vaccine Alliance. And if you look at their consortium, it's vaccine manufacturers, UNICEF, World Bank, and they funded that to about $1 billion. And so the Clinton Global Initiative and the Gates Foundation are sort of the 2 doppelgangers, sort of the twins in this, are part of this with a whole consortium. And the goal is they're really the frontsmen for big pharma. They're the frontsmen pushing, and when you actually work out the numbers, they're basically carving out the different vaccines, and they have the pharma consortium behind them. And what's their business model? Let's just look at it from their quote unquote, entrepreneurial business model. This is the goal. Pharma is crashing. They're saying, wow, you know, I create a drug, you know, I only have 200,000, 1 million people who have cardiac disease, whatever, you know, or 300 million. Imagine if I could create a product that everyone had to take, right? That's like the biggest business opportunity, right? You know, email was one of them, but, you know, you couldn't make money off that because I couldn't patent it at the time. But imagine everyone had to breathe air and you had to charge for that. So imagine if we could get everyone having to get a vaccine. So,
well, it's a replacement for the carbon tax, or at least a supplement to it, I suppose, because everybody uses energy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what's fascinating is the people who support the mass immunization of everyone are the same people who support the carbon tax nonsense. You know, I did this video exposing the Paris Accords, which is out there, but if you look at those 2, and in fact, if someone supports this and they don't do this, or they do this and not this one, they're probably the not so obvious establishment, okay? So, because, you know, they play both sides. So for example, you have a Bobby Kennedy who attacks Bill Gates, but on the other hand, is mum on Hillary Clinton, in fact, endorsed her 3 times. He is he's against vaccines, but is pro-climate change. So we have the not so obvious establishment sort of being a chameleon to try to manipulate activists at the bottom. So if we look at this, where does all of this come from? If you look at the history of Big Pharma, they're enormously, enormously successful at amazing PR and marketing. And amazing. And I'll give you, you can get an audience, a market of 7.2 billion people, let's say on average, spending about $1,000 a year, that's a $7.2 trillion recurring market. Now, imagine this, if you could get the government its public so afraid that they impose this as a mandate. Now you've created a consortium. So Gavi is leading this consortium with 2 of its cylinders, Gates Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative, which are probably being funded in all sorts of, many incestuous ways. Back-ending that is a major big pharma companies who are part of Gavi. They're the consortium partners. In fact, the SDG 3 goals is supported not just by the WHO and United Nations, but the IFPMA, the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers. The 3 leadership council of that is Eli Lilly, Shinogi from Japan, and Roche. All right. So this consortium, it's an ad campaign, man. That's what it is. Massive ad campaign filtered through fake science, which we can talk about. And the goal is 7.2 billion people, a captive audience, don't even have to market to them. So imagine taking from a verticalization model, which Microsoft was very enormously successful at doing. By the way, the strategy brought to you by McKinsey. Gates Foundation hired McKinsey to map this out. So the model here is that the mandate of vaccines takes place, and you, just like it's no longer countries, right? Before the empires split up portions of territory, now you're going to split up portions of people's bloodstreams. Okay, you own hepatitis B1 bloodstream, you own HPV, you own this bloodstream. So if you think about it from a pyramid model, you have God knows who the trillionaires names who we don't know, but right behind them is a visible deep state, the CDC, the WHO, the foundations, Chan Zuckerberg, et cetera. And behind them, you have the pharma companies who need this to serve their masters who invest in big pharma.
Ooh, wait. I've had a thought. What if, Dr. Shiva, what if you could face a disease that mutated every year and then it wouldn't be like a one-time smallpox or polio vaccine, but you got the hamster wheel of infinite cash coming your way?
It's recurring revenue. Look, when I did email, right? Interesting enough, in 1978, people, asked, was it commercialized? Well, in the old time-sharing systems, we used to charge for it. If you have a company which you get recurring revenue, you get a much higher multiple on your stock price. So imagine, to your point, every year you have a new need for a new vaccine, new variations, new mutations. Now you have 7.2 billion people. Again, I use that $1,000 number. It could be 2,000, it could be 100. My point I'm making is you have a beautiful recurring revenue model. And in order to get that recurring revenue business, what do you need? You need an amazing marketing campaign, a global marketing campaign. And that's what we're right in the middle of now. Whenever you do marketing campaigns, what do? You typically do a soft launch, and then a beta launch, and a gold launch. Well, the soft launch was Event 201. Test it out. How does it work out the kinks. In my view, we're in the middle of the beta launch, seeing how you do it in live. Now, the full launch will probably be next year. If they pull this off and scare everyone, and that's why I've been doing my videos and I've been out there educating people on the immune system, is that the full launch looks like this. Okay, do you want the economies to be crashed again? Do you want everyone to be in their homes? Look, let's just put everyone gets a vaccine card. You don't want your neighbor screwing up the economy, do you? Do you want Bob screwing it up?
Do you want to have a driver's license? It's a nice economy you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it and you weren't allowed to drive.
Exactly. Or you weren't allowed to take your kid to daycare, or you weren't allowed out of your home, or you couldn't go to your gym, or you couldn't visit your parents in another country. So that is what the goal is. It's a 7.2 billion person market opportunity worth, upwards of $10 trillion year over year. So from their standpoint, everyone says, well, why would they do this to the economy? Well, it's a return on investment. You put enough fear, you crash the economies just enough. By the way, they get a double whammy. because the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese are involved. They have a lot of, dollar reserves. You crash the economy, you buy things on a song now, so you're going to make your return anyway, because as you kick this back up, you're going to make money on that, and you're going to also get indentured servants, because many of the large Chinese financial houses actually are the ones who funded banks like lenders like Wells Fargo. So when the U.S. working class crashes, or the world working class, well, now they're going to also get a rental revenue. They'll get two sets of revenue. They'll get revenue from recurring on rent because people won't be able to afford their homes, and they're going to also get the bloodstream revenue. So it's really a recurring revenue model. And Bill Gates knows about this because Microsoft realized that they weren't going to make as much money selling just simple software. They had to move to the cloud where you could get a recurring revenue model. So this is a well thought out business model. And that's why Gates funded hundreds of millions of dollars to McKinsey to do all of this. So those people listening out there, you need to understand these people are very sophisticated, highly organized, very adept. And that's why they not only have the overt frontmen like Gates, but they also have the people who confuse people, Stefan, who try to say, yeah, I'm fighting against vaccines, I'm for medical freedom. Guys like Bobby Kennedy. He hasn't done jack for vaccines. He's misled the movement. And when I got involved in this movement about, I've been in the health thing forever, right? Studying health systems, immune system. When I came into it, I said, something doesn't smell right. You're basically telling everyone should get the same vaccines. There's no vaccine safety assessment standards. But I said the only way out of it, we have to build a bottoms-up militant revolutionary movement, not this negotiating with legislators. That's what these nonprofits were doing. They take money from these poor moms who are afraid. Everyone was giving money to Children's Defense Fund, and these guys like Big Tree, right, who are starting to want to build his own media thing. But they didn't understand the fundamental issue, that this is so fundamental, we have to have an uprising bottoms up. So I led one of the big movements in New Jersey, which I said, screw this negotiating with these corrupt legislators. Let's march on the streets. They were so afraid they didn't pass the bill. They didn't even bring it up. That was January 6th, 13th, Stefan. And that's right after that is when you see the coronavirus start coming. It wasn't accidental that we saw all this dissension taking place globally. In Hong Kong, millions of people protesting. In Wuhan, anti-pollution protests, not anti-CO2, pollution protests. In France, Venezuela, India, a populist leader gets reelected. The United States, Trump. In the midst of all this anti-establishment commotion is when we impose this thing called a quote unquote a pandemic. So all of this is beautifully well orchestrated, but I just want people to think about this. Forget conspiracy for a second. By the way, it's not there is a deep state, but just think about it from a marketing campaign over here with a product development strategy over here. That's what this is. Gates, McKinsey is the architect, and the Clintons, and they're probably getting paid off enormously on the back end. Remember, these foundations are enormous business operations where they literally steal money out of the public coffers, and they make us look, they want us to make, oh, isn't Bill Gates and Warren Buffett such nice people? They're giving away their money. They're not giving away their money. They're taking it out of taxes, and they're putting it in a foundation where they only have to give 5% of the assets away. They get to keep the other 95%. And then on top of it, they like to act, they make us think they're the saviors of the world. So they get triple whammies out of this. They get to keep their money, they get to look good, and then they get to control public policy. That's what's going on. And
okay, so hang on.
Okay? It's, this is a virus. There's many viruses that we get. Now, we can start talking about bioweaponry, was it created, etc. My point is this. Whether it's a bioweapon or not, it comes down to this fundamental issue. What do we do to support the immune system? That's the fundamental question. And how does the immune system work?
So I've got one idea. How about you don't stay inside and away from the sun? That's just one thing I'm going to toss out there for funsies.
That's one. Let me give you something even more powerful. I just did a video on this. Something even more powerful than that. Forget even foods. I can talk about supplements. Let's talk about something even more powerful. You know what that is? Social interactions. The number one reason, there's been a longevity study done many years ago. The number one reason when they looked at many, many cultures, they wanted to figure out why people live long. The number one reason, Stefan, was here are the top three reasons. And the top three did not include food. You know what the number one was? Social interactions.
We're social animals. We're dogs, not cats. We need each other desperately. Health is communal activity.
Well, you can even, you can see dogs, you don't give a dog enough I mean, anyone, you can destroy someone. You can actually destroy someone. The research by Stephen Cole, by the way, there's a 1988 landmark study which clearly showed that lack of social isolation would lead to detriment worse than high blood pressure, worse than obesity, and worse than even smoking. You might as well start smoking, okay?
If it gets you friends, if you have a cigarette and you have friends, you're better off.
Right. But that's been scientifically shown. And then at the molecular systems level, the work of Stephen Cole with humans and macaque monkeys, socially isolating them, at the gene expression level, it's shown that your body will upregulate genes which are inflammatory, and downregulate, which means suppress genes which cause antiviral activity. So think about that. So social isolation leads to viral infection and cancer and a number of other diseases.
I'm sorry,
by that, we have to fight for freedom. You talked about censorship. Without open discourse and debate, without the ability to have, disagreements openly, we will never practice the scientific method. We will get into scientific consensus. That's sort of fascism, right? That leads to fiction, not truth. So scientific consensus leads to fiction, scientific method leads to truth. So we need freedom to get to truth. One of the things I've promoted as a solution to that is we need to have a Digital Rights Act, which means a United States Postal Service, which this sounds really weird to people. When I was doing a thing with Scott Adams, Scott didn't get it. And then he goes, oh my God, what you're saying makes sense. And others now get it. The Postal Service was created by the founders of the country so I could transact a communication with you. It just happened to be in paper mail. And if anyone interfered, it was a 20-year sentence in prison. The Postal Service has a police force. So 1997, when email volume overtook postal mail volume, I could see the writing on the wall. I went to the heads of the Postal Service. I said, you guys should be offering a public version of email, a public version of YouTube, and the Facebook equivalent.
Oh, that's covered under the Non-Interference Act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Encryption ain't going to do it, Stefan, because we don't have any rights. Because everyone will try to, encrypt. And the Postal Force is a police force. They thought it was a crazy idea. Anyway, it's interesting to see the Postal Service is going down again. And I was actually commissioned by the Inspector General in 2013 to write 2 reports to show how they could make billions, because my thought was you and I would probably pay about $50. And remember, this would be a competitor to Facebook and Google, but more importantly, they couldn't interfere. If you want to use Google, great. So that's the Digital Rights Act. That's how we get freedom. We can start conversing in the digital world. Freedom and truth comes from Citizens Rights Act. That's my second solution. What does that mean? That means we need to destroy the scientific establishment. And that destruction will only occur if we recognize that when we fund public research, that data is my data and it's your data. When they do research experiments, it should go right to the cloud. If someone does an experiment on a mice, whatever they do, put it to the cloud. It's my data. I'm pretty smart. There's 1 billion other people or 100 million other people in this country who are smart. Download that data. So first thing this will affect is where's all the climate change data? I want to see it.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but was it the original hockey stick graph? Once they released the methodology, they realized you could plug random numbers into it and get a hockey stick graph.
Exactly. So the issue is we need to go to citizen science. We need to take the power away from the academics. Because remember, in the Indian caste system, the academics were the Brahmins, the scribes, and that's what we've created. Fauci is really a quote-unquote a Brahmin, okay? Who's a scribe who advises the king, in this case, the politician. He's always there, right? Presidents come and go. This guy's always there. They shouldn't allow these guys to be in there this long. So when you look at a guy like Fauci, he's practicing everything which is anti-human, anti-medicine. Number one, he's practicing exclusivity. A small cult of people are going to decide. Second thing, he's practicing centralization of authority. A few set of people. Opacity. How are all these decisions being made? The other piece of it is it's all about depersonalization, treating everyone like a lump. And based on that is why we're all locked up. Everyone is being treated the same, when the reality should be we should take the immunocompromised, give them high-dose vitamin D, which creates cathelicidins, which are antimicrobial, give them high-dosage vitamin A. And by the way, those two are very few, no side effect solutions. Give them vitamin C. And for the rest of us, let's take around 5,000 to 10,000 IUs of vitamin D and A. And if you want to take other herbs, great, but we should be out there freaking working. This is total nonsense. And all of this is based on the imposition of fake science by Fauci. And he knows what he's doing. And I think the key is I'm willing to, let's talk the science. Let's talk molecular systems. Let's talk infectious disease. Openly in a round table, if Gates wants to show up, who has no knowledge of this, if Hillary Clinton wants to show up, and if Fauci wants to show up, and they can bring all the scientists they want. I'll take them all on. But the bottom line is that they are actively created this fear mongering on a fake science model, on the ignorance of people's understanding of the immune system. So what we're seeing, Stefan, in closing, if we want to sort of summarize this, we're seeing the conversion of big science, big, academia, big pharma at one point, and it's all to make sure that we have mandated medicine, we suppress dissent, and if it means printing through quantitative easing $6 trillion to crash the economy, they're fine with that. That's like, I'm going to make a $6 trillion investment today, which I'll get, if you look at over a 20-year horizon, about what, 7 trillion, 140 trillion over the next 10 years or whatever that is, right? So this is relatively pennies for the global elite. And if people can really understand that we're looking at the consolidation of a corporation, a global elite corporation that spans national boundaries, which is intent on securing their power through a model where all of us are mandated to take a medicine, mandated right into our bloodstream, mandated where if we don't do that, we'll be tracked and not allowed to move. This is one of the most dangerous times we're in. However, the good news is that there's a lot of smart people, common sense people, working people, plumbers, electricians, nurses, engineers, who know something doesn't make sense. And that's why I think we're at a very interesting inflection point in human history with this occurrence. And it's probably a huge opportunity for people to get awakened and smash these people. They need to be obliterated, because what they are doing to humanity is destroying humanity. Because what they're really saying is that I want to make you a machine in the Chinese factory. And China was, China from the elites was their testing ground. And if you think about it, China's being exported. Made in China means made in China. We will consolidate. We will create the Chinese Communist Party version of mandated state medicine, mandated state academia, mandated state media, which will deny. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter that a 14-year-old kid wrote all the code, the inbox, outbox, called it email, has a copyright, doesn't matter. The first thing they do, and it doesn't matter, my 4 degrees at MIT won't matter, right? Because when you go against them, they will attempt to attack you. And the only way out of this is to go viciously after them. That's the only way to win, Stefan, uncompromisingly go after them. And that's the way we're going to win. And we also have to recognize that the establishment is always not the enemy. It's the not so obvious establishment. Those people that they put, like the Bernie Sanders. So all you Bernie Sanders people listening out there, he sold out to Hillary Clinton. And all you people who think Bobby Kennedy is going to fight for your medical freedom, he endorsed Hillary Clinton. He attacks Gates. So people say, oh, Bobby attacks Gates. Well, you know what? He endorsed Hillary Clinton 3 times. There's nothing more to talk about, period. So the way we're going to win is to wake up and realize this movement's going to come bottoms up from working people like me and you and others, Stefan, who speak the truth, and it's going to be bottoms up. It's not going to be top down. Hollywood celebrities, we don't need you. The Kennedys, we don't need you. And it's going to be bottoms up. And when people get this, we're going to have a revolution like that. I'm telling you, if you look at history, and it won't have to even be violent, it'll be an awakening that says, wait a minute, this is my body. I'm going to decide what goes into my body. No one owns it. And you know what? The sun is an amazing vehicle. It produces vitamin D. It produces cathelicidins. And you know what? Fresh vegetables without pesticides are what I need. Clean air, clean water, clean food. Meanwhile, in the United States, we have a D+ in infrastructure. Massachusetts, the home to MIT, the home to Harvard, the home to all the elites. You know what they got by the American Society of Civil Engineers for infrastructure? An F-. 125 points out of 350. The third worst infrastructure, which means crumbling bridges, crumbling roads, crumbling water systems. Who the hell are these people like Elizabeth Warren, all these academic people? They have nothing. They should shut the hell up and talk about public health. You have no credibility. Nothing. So we need to understand that we need to stop paying so much respect to these people. They've lost all of our respect. F-. in infrastructure, Massachusetts. And Massachusetts got a D++ in the worst corruption. The 10th most corrupt state, the 3rd most breaking infrastructure. And if you look at the history of infectious diseases, if we really want to talk about infectious diseases, you know how they've been solved? Not through vaccines or medical interventions, through infrastructure. Go back to the 1900s. 40 out of 100,000 people had infectious diseases, okay? It dropped down before the polio and measles vaccine to 1/2 out of 100,000. How did that occur? Vitamin A, nutrition, sanitation, refrigeration, elimination of child labor. Understand that infectious diseases, the plumber and the sanitation worker did more for infectious diseases than any pharmacist or doctor. That's what actually happened. Now, if they truly care about infectious diseases, let's start by talking about how much pollution that's in the atmosphere and how much the Paris Accords allows China to pollute. Paris Accords allows China to go from 11 billion metric tons of carbon to 22 billion. That's why even the Chinese in China were protesting, out on the streets, risking their lives. And let's talk about clean water, clean air. You know, we allow companies like Monsanto, which now is a part of Bayer, who have polluted, destroyed the topsoil of this country, have enslaved many, many farmers. But they don't want to talk about that, the 70% of lawyer lobbyists, because they're part of the problem. They do not want to talk about clean air, clean water, clean food. They don't want to talk about the 30% obesity. They don't want to talk about the 800, 700,000 people die of heart disease and so on. They don't want to talk about the 1.9 million hospitalizations that occur every year from pharmaceutical drug adverse reactions. I say we shut down everything and solve that. And during that shutdown, let's start doing farms. Let's shut down Monsanto if we cared about public health. But that shutdown is not what I see. What I see is a shutdown to destroy the American worker, to seize people's assets and properties, and to basically destroy this economy on behalf of Bill Gates, Hillary Clinton, deep state, the WHO, the Chinese Communist Party, to basically seize power of not only the American worker, but the everyday people. So we become a factory. We become automatons in a large factory, which is what China has done, and we lose our humanity. That's what this is about, Stefan. This is about freedom or slavery. This is not just about a freaking vaccine or a virus. This is about an important point in human history. And this has occurred over and over again, as we discussed. But I think we have an enormous opportunity, actually, to rise up and to reclaim our destiny as human beings.